Being fairly new to making my own analysis and opinionated videos on video games, I was exploring some options for video ideas, and whilst I was surfing YouTube, I stumbled on a channel called Downward Trust. I watched one of his videos called Assassin's Creed: A Great and Terrible Franchise. Watching this video, I was thinking what I thought of all the points being made, as I played a lot of Assassin's Creed myself in the past, and thus I thought to myself, why not make a response video? I do not see many response type videos in the realm of opinion and analysis of video games, but I figure, why not give it a try? As such, here is my response to Downward Trust's Assassin's Creed: A Great and Terrible Franchise. Who knows, maybe this will spark some debate amongst the community of gaming analysis.
Every game is beautiful, and for every good thing about the series, there exists just as many issues. Has the series really been as good as it could have been?
The main thesis of Downward Trust's video is that the Assassin's Creed series has some beautiful games, but for every good aspect, the series seems to be riddled and haunted by just as many issues. In short, the series often shows more potential for a good game instead of the actualization of a good game. Most gameplay aspects are well documented by Downward Trust, with the following list showing all of them. This encapsulates most gameplay elements quite well, with the exception that later installments also had player versus player multiplayer and certain challenge aspects for replayability. Already, one can spot a couple of aspects which were often cited as issues of the series instead of positive aspects. Think of the brainless and easy combat, or the infinite collectibles that grant you almost nothing interesting. These aspects show a lack of focus in core gameplay, mismatching as much as possible in order to make it sandboxy.
The original Assassin's Creed is perhaps the best example of something both spectacular and unspectacular.
Analyzing Assassin's Creed 1, DT observes that the game has more flags and nothingness than actual varied gameplay. Cities look the same and the game is spectacular yet unspectacular at the same time. Unraveling the Templars plot while you regain your honor is an intriguing narrative, but the actual gameplay of gathering info and killing targets is repetitive and boring.
Every mission played out the same. You would travel to an area, gather information about your target, and then kill him. The 3 cities all looked very much the same, and the only thing to do outside the main quest was collect flags.
While all these criticisms hold true, I have to say with some embarrassment that I did collect all those goddamn flags back in high school. Looking back in hindsight, it looked barely like a game at all, outside of the main story. But somehow, I look back on it with fond memories. I will never collect all those flags again, but I can appreciate the amount of detail the creators put into the locations of the game, and collecting the flags made me go all over the map for that. Saying that the cities are too similar seems disputable, as Damascus has more Eastern-styled roofs and marketplaces, while Akko looks more Christian and has a more destroyed look as well, as it was under siege. The tone of the cities is actually very subtly distinguished via different overall color schemes, and thus, I wouldn't say that they were too similar. Being the first game, I think many people can forgive the lack of things to do for an incredible historical immersion with an intricate plot, both in the historical period as well as in the contemporary period. The information gathering before assassinations was not a horrible concept, but as DT outlined, it was always the same and thus repetitive. If they made more varied ways of gathering info, the formula might have turned out to feel a whole lot different.
If you were to ask fans which Assassin's Creed is the best, you're more than likely going to get 2 as your answer. A colorful cast of characters, gorgeous architecture, a diversity of activities, and a wonderful coming-of-age story made it genuinely great.
Going over to Assassin's Creed 2, Downward Trust correctly states that this game is often hailed as the darling of the series, with lots of immersion and a wonderful coming-of-age story. Ezio was way more charismatic than Altaïr. Renaissance Italy was filled with a rich cast of characters, gorgeous architecture, a diversity of activities and NPCs that did things like talking, flirting, selling wares, playing music, etc. The city was alive and breathed. Most people would completely agree on Assassin's Creed 2 being the crowd favorite. Assassin's Creed 2 started with flamboyance and youthful arrogance, and most people immediately connected to the charismatic Ezio. The moment you climb the roof with your brother and the Assassin's Creed II logo comes into view with the camera spinning around is probably one of the most memorable and cinematic openings of a video game ever. It encapsulates the same historical immersion that made the first game so good, together with a more relatable character and story in the form of Ezio's coming of age. When the main event happens during the introductory hours and the plot is pushed forward, you feel for Ezio and want revenge, just as much as he wants it. The story carries relatable human meaning and later pushes you into deeper subplots of political intrigue, assassins versus Templars and whatnot, recognizable from the first entry. Combined with more refined and varied gameplay mechanics and a lot of less tedious things to do, Assassin's Creed II was a great sequel and an even greater AC game.
They started the yearly release trend. As we've seen with other games, requiring a developer to put out a game every single year can be a very bad thing for games. Such was the case here. Both beautifully continued Ezio's story from Assassin's Creed II, but didn't do much else.
Turning to Revelations and Brotherhood, DT calls it the turning point of the series, or the shift. Some weird gameplay mechanics were introduced, many were rehashed, and the story was not as relatable or deep as 1 and 2. This is where the yearly cycle of releases started to show its ugly face. Brotherhood brought fresh PvP multiplayer and the option to replay missions with added challenges for replayability, but recycled many animations, had a shorter story and added more useless collectibles.
Revelations was even worse as its additions were poorly thought out. The present day, on the other hand, was literally turned into a strange first-person puzzle platformer that felt ridiculously out of place in this genre.
These additions are painful to behold in hindsight. Compared to earlier Assassin's Creed installments, for the first time, it felt like Ubisoft was simply mashing together gameplay concepts in order to make sure the game had enough content to warrant its price tag. The tower defense game was forgettable, and the bomb creation options, while fun, were somewhat redundant as they were never truly necessary to progress in the game. The yearly release cycle ensured no truly new innovative ideas were tried out, and thus, the game was poor to mediocre at best in its reception. Brotherhood and Revelations were the first ACs responsible for the shift in quality according to DT. While I agree on the earlier discussed points, I'd say that the true shift started at Revelations. Brotherhood is hailed by many as the perfection of Assassin's Creed II because of the addition of many new fun elements. It had an interesting and unique as well as a fun cat and mouse multiplayer, a wide range of new weapons which enhanced stealth and not necessarily combat, such as the poison dart and crossbow. There was a Brotherhood mechanic which made you recruit your own assassins and train them accordingly, effectively making you the head of a chapter of assassins. The lairs of Romulus were added, creating new and exciting parkour challenges. Some new mechanics, such as the tower capture and city renovation minigames, were more tedious, but overall, many people loved Brotherhood, as it further perfected the AC2 formula and also continued that storyline, albeit much shorter and certainly less intriguing. Brotherhood felt way more like a further refined AC2, with more good new stuff than bad new stuff. The only criticism I would have is that it might have been better to release it as, say, a huge 2-part DLC comparable to the Shivering Isles of Oblivion instead of a full new game. All in all, I'd say I would call Revelations the true shift of quality loss, as I saw more warning signs of rehashed mechanics and poorly thought out gameplay additions comparable to AC Brotherhood.
While Assassin's Creed III maintains the spirit of the original games and offers a critical look into history, it is often the AC game most widely criticized. We got a buggy mess that resulted in so many problems, even with the patches.
Assassin's Creed III, the disaster, the bug-filled mess, the American Revolution. Climbing through colonial Boston and New York with significantly less exciting heights. No huge cathedrals. The game was riddled with bugs even after patches. Gameplay additions were once again poorly thought out, such as hunting game and creating your own settlement. At this part, DT's analysis and mine's coincide again, as this game made many people feel incredibly disappointed with the franchise. The yearly cycle of releases really showed its ugly face here, Personally, I was one of the people who experienced countless game-breaking bugs in the beginning. It was baffling how they decided to implement the boring Little House on the Prairie-like gameplay mechanics. Connor was a dull and angry character with zero relatable characteristics. Heck, Bad Guy Haytham was way more interesting. The American Revolution was shoehorned in to guide the story from event to event, instead of giving Connor some relatable story like earlier installments for us. While it's debatable if the hunting mechanics were poorly thought out, I'd argue that they were simply redundant, comparable to the bomb creation in Revelations. The modern day plot was botched and, well, as DT said, let's not get into the ending. In short, Assassin's Creed III was indeed the disaster and living evidence that yearly obligatory releases affect overall quality.
Black Flag was for many of us seen as a miniature rebirth for the franchise. A charming Ezio-esque lead was found in the form of Edward Kenway, and the core mechanics of the franchise were sidelined by new gameplay focused on naval battles and exploration. The story was less about the Assassin-Templar conflict and more about just good old-fashioned pirates.
Coined as the New Hope by Downward Thrust, Assassin's Creed IV Black Flag was a story about pirates, and Edward Kenway, an outsider from the Assassins vs Templar story. Fittingly and somewhat ironically, this game felt like a renaissance of the franchise, harking back to the charm of Ezio and the atmosphere that Renaissance Italy breathed in AC2. The mash of gameplay elements from earlier installments were replaced by naval battles and exploration. Assassin's Creed IV is an interesting game to consider. DT's analysis is interesting and I have some things to say regarding my own perspective on things here. While it is true that one could argue that Edward's story feels disconnected from earlier installments, mainly revolving around him wanting to live his life, get rich and set up a pirate utopia, is actually a perfect analogy for what the Assassins and Templars feud over time and time again: freedom versus structure in your life. It's also a relatable story comparable to Ezio's coming of age. As time passes in the game, you realize that Edward's pirate utopia is impossible, and at some point he needs to step out of his dream or he will die, as all the other pirate friends he worked with did. Furthermore, the story of the game connects this coming of age for Edward with the Assassins and Templars plot as well. The Assassins remind him of bigger causes, but he rejects it time and time again, and only when conflict and disaster happen and he loses loved ones, Edward decides to work with the Assassins, comparable to AC2 and Ezio, albeit more drawn out. In a way, to me this was way more refreshing than the earlier Assassin's Creed III, which took itself way too seriously when it came to the Assassins and Templars plot. AC4 took a step back, took a breather and let us experience a different game with the same set of themes as previous games, but this time feeling more relatable again, while still holding a connection to the bigger than us plotline of the Assassins and Templars, which pulled Edward in the story anyway. As DT correctly mentions, Edward reminds us of Ezio, and his journey of personal freedom and lack of responsibility are strong parallels and very relatable human themes. The gameplay was fun and yes, less assassin-like. Again, keeping in mind the narrational themes and the fact that people were not pleased with Assassin's Creed III, one could argue this fresh take was necessary. At the very least, AC4 had the focus AC3 lacked and was less of a disconnected mess when it came to gameplay elements compared to its predecessor.
If there was ever a game that deserves to be called underrated, it would definitely have to be Rogue. Released the exact same day as Unity, yet with none of the promotion, Rogue was seen as a consolatory gift for past gen players, and it definitely shows.
Unfortunately, I did not play Rogue yet, and thus I cannot comment on the game. But DT's commentary surely makes me want to pick it up. One thing that did struck me though is that DT's commentary is very similar to how I and many others viewed Brotherhood, and indeed, he references Brotherhood in comparison. Yes, there were reused assets, but there were also many unique refinements to the earlier game from the same time period. It could be argued that games like Rogue and Brotherhood should have been part or at least be sold as expansions from AC2 and AC3, or should have had their own 2-year development cycles to be made into even bigger games.
Unity needs no introduction. If you were following any form of social media during its immediate release, there's a good chance you saw the hideous results of its lack of polish. The ironic thing is, if Unity had stayed cooking another year, it might have reviewed as one of the best in the series. But alas, such was not the case for the French company.
Unity could have been a great game. Parkour was improved and innovated, side quests and rift missions, mysteries, etc. were all really intriguing and fun in concept. But the fact that gameplay and immersion were so harshly broken around every corner just meant nothing hit its mark on release. Unity was also the first game to give the player Hitman-esque unique options to assassinate targets, giving you a true and stealthy assassin feel, as well as giving you more freedom in how to tackle your missions. But again, a bundle of game-breaking bugs made it almost impossible to truly experience all of these at launch. Unity was a tragic example of a game that really needed that extra year, in which case it would have been as much a classic as AC2 or AC4. It's the quintessential example of the entire argument of downward thrust, which I subscribe to as well. The Assassin's Creed series is a game series often showing more potential for a good game instead of the actualization of a good game.
Assassin's Creed Syndicate is a game that is hardly talked about, despite its essentially fixing everything wrong with Unity. There were hardly any bugs this time around, the navigation system was more streamlined, and to top it all off, we finally got a female protagonist, discounting liberation.
At Assassin's Creed Syndicate, people started to stop caring about the franchise. With the damage done over multiple installments, the fact that Syndicate fixed all of Unity's problems was not enough for it to sell well. Lower sales numbers prompted the end of the one-year release cycle. DT's analysis is spot on here once again. The game had a great setting, great protagonists and quite fun gameplay, but the damage had been done over the past couple of years. After this one, they finally realized they needed to take a time out. And you could feel it throughout the game. After a while, saving districts, collecting random rubbish, finishing activities, the game felt more like a chores list instead of a true new Assassin's Creed game. Syndicate was a good game, maybe even a great game, but not innovative and came a year too late considering Unity should have been this game.
Assassin's Creed is a franchise that has definitely earned its stripes, but Ubisoft unfortunately let the game's reputation get ahead of the actual development process.
Downward Thrust's conclusion brings up an issue and genuine question we see with many game franchises nowadays. Underestimating development time for good overall quality can lead to subpar games and mixed to poor receptions. You can only continue on so long before the bad reception catches up to you and lowers your sales numbers. The name of a franchise is not enough to continually sell your game. What they fail to see is that it was some sort of innovation that brought the original AC to our attention, as well as a certain quality to its concept. During its release in 2007, many games were simply new entries in their existing franchises. Assassin's Creed was exciting and new, feeling like something truly unique. Innovation does not mean reinventing the wheel every new game, but, as Downward Thrust mentioned as well, rehashing too many elements every entry means that everyone knows what to expect from a new installment, and thus they will not pick up your game at release if they crave something new and exciting. The mythology and character of Assassin's Creed universe is vast, interesting and unique. Ubisoft should have invested more time in games like Brotherhood, Black Flag and Unity, which all pushed the envelope and tried out new stuff, but ultimately were more of a potential for a great game than an actualization of a great game due to time constraints. Thanks for watching this video, and thanks for Downward Thrust's excellent Assassin's Creed analysis, which prompted my video response. It might not have been the most exciting response as I agreed on most points, but I felt like making a response since I really enjoy this perspective. I'm fairly new myself to doing more opinion and analysis like videos on video games, and this is just a way for me to dip my toes in new, unfamiliar waters. Be gentle, oh new viewers. Leave me a comment what you think about the AC franchise and what you would love to see from me in the future. I'm mostly experimenting right now, also with different content such as Game of Thrones. My name is Paper Sharps, and I will see you next time.